The day started like any other for the woman. She woke up before the sun rose, cooked a small breakfast for her daughter, and prepared her for school. Their home was tiny, but every corner was filled with warmth. The woman always tried her best to make life feel normal, even though everything they owned was earned through long hours and quiet sacrifices. Her daughter, a bright-eyed girl with quick thoughts, followed her everywhere. She would sit near the window every morning, watching her mother tie her hair into a neat ponytail. "Will you be okay today?" the daughter asked, the same question she asked every morning. The woman smiled and touched her cheek. "I'm always okay when you're here." The girl held her school bag close. "I'll wait for you after school, and I'll be there," the woman promised. But that day, life took a turn she didn't expect. At the small shop where she worked, things moved quickly. She cleaned shelves, arranged items, and handled customers with patience. She was never one to argue, never one to talk loudly, but everyone knew she worked hard. That was her strength: quiet effort, steady hands. Around midday, a misunderstanding happened. A customer accused her of mishandling a product. The store owner believed the customer without even listening to her side. Words were spoken that hurt her deeply. Before she could understand what was happening, she was told she had violated rules she had never broken. The store decided to file a complaint. Everything happened so fast. She stood there in shock, trying to explain, but the more she spoke, the more they dismissed her. She didn't have anyone to support her, and she didn't have money for a lawyer. All she had was her own voice, and the truth she knew inside her heart. At the end of the day, she picked up her daughter from school. Her eyes were tired, but she forced a smile. The daughter noticed immediately that something was wrong. "Are you upset?" the girl asked softly. No, the woman replied, trying to hide her worries. "Just a long day." The girl wasn't convinced. She had grown up seeing her mother struggle, and she could read her expressions better than anyone else. But she didn't push her to talk. Instead, she held her mother's hand tighter as they walked home late that night. After dinner, the woman finally told her daughter what happened. She sat on the edge of the bed, head lowered, voice trembling a little. "I have to go to court tomorrow," she said quietly. "The shop thinks I did something wrong." The girl blinked. "But you didn't." "No," the woman whispered. "But they think I did." The girl didn't speak for a moment. She placed her small hand on her mother's arm. "I'll come with you." The woman shook her head. "No, it's too serious. You have school." The girl shook her head right back. "I want to go with you. What if they say something untrue?" The woman looked into her daughter's eyes and felt something stronger than fear. She felt love, the kind that stands in front of storms. She agreed to take her the next morning. When they reached the courthouse, the building felt cold and huge. The girl held her mother's hand tightly. The mother looked at the large doors and swallowed nervously. She had never been inside a courtroom before. She wasn't sure what to say or how to defend herself, but she knew she had to try. Inside, people were already seated. Some were talking quietly, others waiting for their names to be called. The mother sat down with her daughter beside her. The girl kept looking around, observing everything: the lawyers, the judge's bench, the thick files, the people arguing quietly in corners. She didn't look scared. She looked curious. After a few minutes, the judge entered the room. Everyone stood. The judge was firm-looking but not unfriendly. The woman hoped she would be fair. She took a deep breath as they called her name. She walked forward slowly, her daughter following close behind. When the judge noticed the small girl holding her mother's hand, she raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything immediately. The opposing lawyer smirked slightly, as if thinking the woman was unprepared and foolish for coming alone. The judge began. "Are you representing yourself today?" "Yes," the woman replied softly. "And the child?" the judge asked. "She's with me because I have no one else to leave her with," the mother explained. The judge nodded. "All right, let's proceed." The opposing lawyer started with confidence. He spoke loudly, used complicated words, and acted as if the case was already decided. He said the woman had ignored the shop rules. He claimed she had caused a problem for the customer. He even suggested she tried to hide her mistake. The mother stood quietly, listening. She wanted to interrupt, to correct him, but every time she opened her mouth, he spoke faster. She felt small, lost, like her truth didn't matter in this room. The girl tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, "But that's not what happened." "I know," the mother whispered back, "but they won't listen." The girl frowned, thinking hard. She looked at the judge, then at the lawyer who kept pointing fingers at her mother. Her small hands clenched into fists. The judge noticed the girl's expression and asked gently, "Is everything all right?" The girl stood up before her mother could stop her. The judge blinked. The lawyer almost laughed. A few people in the room turned to watch. The judge asked again, "Do you want to say something, little one?" The girl nodded seriously. The judge smiled lightly, as if amused. Children don't usually speak in court, but you may say a few words if it's important. The lawyer quietly whispered to his assistant, "This should be funny." The girl took a step forward. Her voice was small, but her confidence was unexpectedly steady. "What the lawyer said is not true," she began. The room shifted. People leaned forward. The judge's smile faded into curiosity. The girl continued, "I was there. I know exactly what happened. My mom didn't do anything wrong. She never breaks rules. She always checks things twice. Even at home. Even with me." The lawyer folded his arms, but the girl kept talking. She explained how they had gone to work early that day because her mom didn't want to be late. She described how her mom helped the customer politely. She told the court how the customer had misunderstood something and blamed her mother out of frustration, not because something bad happened. Her words were simple. No fancy language, no big legal phrases, but every word was true. And truth, when spoken clearly and honestly, becomes powerful. Every person in the room listened. The lawyer's smile slowly disappeared. Even the judge, who had chuckled earlier, leaned back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. The girl kept speaking, describing small details, the ones adults missed. She remembered what the customer wore, what the store shelf looked like, even the exact sentence. Her mom spoke politely to calm the situation. Her memory was sharp. Her words were steady. Her face was serious. The judge finally raised her hand. "Enough," she said gently. The girl stopped and waited. The judge looked at her for a long moment. There was no trace of laughter now. Her eyes were filled with respect, almost admiration. "You may sit," the judge said softly. The girl returned to her mother's side. The mother placed her arm around her, overwhelmed. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. Her daughter had done something she never expected, a small act of courage that changed the atmosphere of the entire courtroom. When the judge looked back at the lawyer, her expression had changed completely. The lawyer swallowed nervously. The judge said, "We'll continue this case after a short break." The woman and her daughter sat down again, but everything felt different now. The woman no longer felt alone. She no longer felt small. Her daughter had stood beside her not just physically, but with her voice, her truth, and her brilliant courage, and for the first time that day, the mother felt hope. Real, strong hope. The courtroom grew completely silent after the little girl finished her bold words. People in the room, lawyers, guards, even some who were waiting for their own cases, turned their heads toward her. No one expected a child to speak like that, especially not in front of a strict judge. The judge leaned back slightly in her chair, trying to hide her surprise. She had seen many unusual things in court, but this was different. There was honesty in the child's voice, something raw and full of emotion. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't over. It was simply the truth that had been sitting in her small heart for too long. Her mother froze beside her, scared that her daughter had spoken out of turn. She gently pulled the girl's arm and whispered, "Please sit down. This is not the place." But the girl didn't sit. Her hands were shaking, yet her chin was raised, like someone ready to fight for the only person who ever fought for her. The judge cleared her throat and said, "Young lady, children do not usually speak in this courtroom, but since you already have, I need to ask you something. Do you understand what's happening here today?" The girl nodded without hesitation. "Yes, ma'am. I understand everything. People are saying my mum did something wrong, but she didn't. She only tried to do her best." The judge stared at her. It was rare to meet a child so aware of adult problems. Most kids were shielded from these moments, but from the way this girl stood, it seemed she had never been protected from anything. The lawyer on the other side, a man who had walked into the court that morning with full confidence, tried to interrupt. He said, "Your Honor, this is inappropriate. The child clearly doesn't understand the legal details. This will only waste time." The girl turned and looked at him with a steady gaze. She wasn't angry, just determined. "I understand more than you think," she said. "I was there. I saw everything. And you weren't." A few people in the courtroom covered their mouths to hide a smile. No one expected such a clear response from someone so young. The judge slowly raised a hand to silence the lawyer. "Let her speak," she said. "We might learn something useful." Her mother looked overwhelmed and whispered again, "Sweetheart, please, sit down before you get us in trouble." But the girl gently shook her head. "You've protected me my whole life. It's my turn now." Her mother's eyes watered. She looked down, afraid the tears would spill. The judge leaned forward. "All right, young lady," she said. "You want to defend your mother. Tell me, in your own words, what happened." The girl took a deep breath. For a moment, it looked like she might cry, but she didn't. She began speaking slowly, making sure every word was clear. She explained how her mother worked long hours, how she sometimes had to rush from one place to another, how she barely slept. She talked about how her mother always tried to keep their home safe, how she never complained even when things got hard, and how she always made sure her daughter had food before she even thought of eating herself. Then she told the judge about the day everything went wrong. She described how her mother had been carrying too many responsibilities at once because she didn't have help. She talked about how something small, something that could happen to anyone, was turned into something big just because other people didn't understand their situation. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't emotional in a loud way. She spoke calmly, like someone who had practiced every word in her mind again and again before coming to court. But the truth was, she had never practiced. She was simply speaking from her heart, and sometimes the heart speaks more clearly than any lawyer. When she finished, the judge asked, "Why are you so sure your mother did nothing wrong?" The girl answered, "Because I live with her. I see everything she does. People who only see her for a few minutes don't know anything. But I do. I know she's not perfect, but she's good. She's honest, and she always tries." The judge blinked a few times, and for the first time that day, the strictness in her face softened. She could see that this wasn't just a child defending her mother. This was someone who had been forced to grow up too early, someone who carried more weight than any child should. The lawyer from the other side looked uncomfortable. He shuffled his papers and tried to appear unaffected. But the judge looked at him and said, "Do you have any questions for the young witness?" He hesitated. He clearly didn't want to question a child who had just spoken with such sincerity. But he also knew he had a job to do. He cleared his throat and asked, "You said your mother is always responsible. But do you think she could have made a mistake that day?" "Everyone makes mistakes, even good people." The girl nodded. "Yes, everyone makes mistakes. Even you, even me. But a mistake isn't a crime, and she didn't hurt anyone." The lawyer opened his mouth, but no words came out. He couldn't argue with that. The judge noticed. Then the judge asked the girl one more question. "Why did you decide to speak today?" Most children stay quiet in these situations. The girl looked down at her small hands, then back up. "Because my mum didn't have anyone else to defend her. She always stands up for me. I had to stand up for her." The judge stayed quiet for a moment, clearly moved. She took off her glasses and set them on the desk. The whole room felt different now, less tense, more human. That the mother finally stood and put an arm around her daughter, pulling her close. She whispered, "You didn't have to do that. I didn't want you to worry." The girl hugged her back. "I've been worried for days. I had to help." The judge tapped her pen on the table softly as she thought. She then looked at the mother and asked a few questions, but her tone was different now, gentler, more understanding. It was clear that the little girl's words had opened a door the adults had overlooked. After speaking with both sides, the judge asked for a short break to review the details again. When she left the courtroom, people whispered to each other. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others smiled softly, touched by the girl's bravery. While waiting, the mother sat down and held her daughter's hand. She whispered, "I'm proud of you, but you scared me." The girl leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I know, but I couldn't stay quiet." When the judge returned, everyone straightened up. She looked more composed than before, but her expression still held the warmth the girl had brought into the room. The judge said, "This case has been presented in many ways, but today I heard something that finally made things clear. Sometimes the truth comes from places we don't expect." The courtroom stayed silent. That she continued, "I believe there was misunderstanding, pressure, and circumstances that were not taken into account before. And after hearing the child's statement, I am reconsidering the conclusions." The mother's heart started racing. Her daughter squeezed her hand. The judge looked directly at them and said, "This court is not here to punish people who are trying their best. And from everything I have heard today, that is exactly what this mother has been doing." A soft gasp went through the room. The judge added, "I am ordering a review to correct the earlier decisions and to consider support instead of punishment." Tears filled the mother's eyes. She covered her mouth with her hand, unable to speak. The girl hugged her tightly, a small smile appearing on her face for the first time that day. The judge then looked at the girl and said gently, "You spoke bravely today. You reminded everyone here that justice is not only about rules, it is also about understanding." The girl nodded, holding on to her mother. As they walked out of the courtroom, people stepped aside and gave them space. Some whispered praises, some wiped their eyes, and some simply watched quietly, touched by what they had witnessed. Outside, the girl finally breathed freely. Her mother kneeled and hugged her with both arms. "Thank you," the mother whispered. "You saved me today." The girl answered softly, "No, "Mum, you saved me every day before this." And in that simple moment, both of them felt something lift. A weight that had been on their shoulders for weeks finally disappeared. They didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long time, they felt hopeful.